الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful, I greet you all in the universal greeting of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Before we commence with tonight's discourse, we begin with a short recitation from the Noble Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
آمين.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذ قال الله يا عيسى إني متوفيك ورافعك إليك مطهرك من الذين كفروا وجاعل الذين اتبعوك فوق الذين كفروا إلى يوم القيامة ثم إلي مرجعكم فاحكم بينكم فيما كنتم فيه تختلفون فأما الذين كفروا فأعذبهم عذابا شديدا في الدنيا والآخرة وما لهم من ناصرين. صدق الله العظيم. Tonight's lecture topic will be on a continuation of last week's topic. Tonight's Sheikh will speak about or discuss Palestine and the way forward, part 2. The format of tonight's function is as follows. Sheikh will speak for approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes. Thereafter, we will have a Q&A for approximately 30 minutes. The Q&A will be as follows. Questions are to be written down legibly on a piece of paper. Questions related to the topic will then be presented to the Sheikh for his kind response. In order to maximize the Sheikh's response to questions, there will be no roving mic for the listening audience. Light refreshments and book signing by the Sheikh will commence after the Q&A session. We humbly request for your kind patience. Thank you, Sheikh. We humbly request that you kindly proceed with tonight's discourse.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem. We begin with Allah's blessed name. We praise Him and we glorify Him as He ought to be praised and glorified. And we pray for peace and for blessings on all His noble messengers, including the last of them all, the Blessed Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, as we greet you from the Mariam B Lecture Hall in Durban, in South Africa, on this, the 19th, it was the 19th and now the 20th day of the month of Sha'ban, with Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And we make the dua which is masnoon, Allahumma barik lana fi Rajabin wa Sha'ban wa baligna Ramadan. Before, Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Before we commence our talk tonight on Palestine, the way forward, it is not often that I have the honor to be joined by two of my classmates. We studied together three of us studied together at the Alimi Institute of Islamic Studies in Karachi, Pakistan, more than 50 years ago. We already have, of course, Professor Dr. Abdul Fadl Mohsin Ibrahim, with whom you are familiar. He's here living in Durban. But Maulana Abdul Rashid drove from Mozambique to come to be with us here tonight. And I'm meeting him for the first time in about 55 years. So it's a happy occasion, and we thank Allah for having given us this chance to meet again and to revive memories of our time when we were students of Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari. May Allah have mercy on his soul. Ameen. The subject of Palestine, the way forward can be approached from the perspective of political analysis. But I am not a political scientist. No. I am a student of the Quran, and I love to go to the Quran to find the guidance with which to respond to events unfolding in the world. In particular, events unfolding in the Holy Land. And in order to do that tonight, I want to go back to Surah Al-Isra of the Quran and to Banu Israel, and to that verse in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declares, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وقضينا إلى بني إسرائيل في الكتاب لتفسدن في الأرض مرتين وَلَتَعْلُنَّ عُلُوًّا كَبِيرًا. That this was written for Banu Israel, that they will commit fasad in the land twice. On both the occasions of fasad had already passed by the time the Quran was revealed. And so how do we respond to the present fasad, which is the third? This has been a problem which has intrigued scholars of Islam for the last 100 years or more. And I myself found difficulty for a long time with this verse of the Quran. How do we explain the third fasad when the Quran speaks of two? And then I realized, because the river of knowledge flows at its own speed, I then eventually realized that while the first fasad was that of Banu Israel, and the second fasad was that of Banu Israel, the third was not Banu Israel. Well then, who it is who controls power in Israel today? We're committing the fasad. And who it is who controls power in the modern Western world, who are aiding and abetting this fasad. Modern Western civilization bears the brunt of responsibility for the atrocities and genocide in the Holy Land. But modern Western civilization is responsible for much more than that. It is a unique event in human history. Never before in entire human history has there ever been a phenomenon like modern Western civilization? And I don't need to spend the next 10, 15 minutes in sharing with you that every time modern Western civilization delivers to us a revolution, it changes the whole world. An industrial revolution, a scientific and technological revolution, a feminist revolution, a revolution in transport, in travel, in communications, a revolution in education, in knowledge. This is something unique in human history. But modern Western civilization is doing more than changing the world again and again. Not only does modern Western civilization control power in the world, but power rests on the foundations of godlessness. And power is constantly used to oppress. And that power has an obsession with the Holy Land. Even before the modern West emerged, while it was still Western Christendom, Christianity of the West, they already showed that obsession with the Holy Land with the Crusades. The Crusades started in 1090 of that Christian era and continued until a British army conquered Jerusalem in 1917. And the British General Allenby then announced, "Today the Crusades have ended." This modern Western civilization has presented challenges to the religious way of life unprecedented in human history. Now then, I need not spend more time on emphasizing that this is an absolutely unique event in history, unprecedented. But the Quran says that it explains all things. Tibyanan likulli shay. And hence there must be an explanation for the phenomenon of modern Western civilization, which today is responsible for the facade and genocide in Gaza. There must be an explanation for modern Western civilization in the Quran. And if we are to look forward to a way forward, we cannot do that without understanding the reality which confronts us. I hope I have made myself clear. What then does the Quran say about modern Western civilization? Here we come to a sad reality. It's a sad reality, and we do not describe it in any way meant to humiliate others. We simply want to enter into the record a sad reality that the world of Islamic scholarship has not as yet presented from the Quran that which explains the phenomenon of modern Western civilization. If I am wrong, I invite you to correct me, not just the audience that is listening to me here in Durban, but in addition, the larger audience who would listen to this lecture on the internet around the world. If I am wrong, I invite you to correct me. Tell me who are the scholars of the Quran who have used the Quran and explained from the Quran the phenomenon of modern Western civilization. My teacher of blessed memory, Maulana Dr. Muhammad Fadl Rahman Ansari, and his teacher, Dr. Muhammad Iqbal, must be credited as pioneers in the effort to offer from the Quran that which explains the phenomenon of modern Western civilization. But for reasons best known to them, they never publicized their views. And when they did speak, they spoke in such a way that it was not clear, for reasons best known to them. But nevertheless, they must be recognized as pioneers in the field. I do not include the Turkish scholar Badiüzzaman Sayyid Nursi in that group, although he also seems to be bordering the group. What does Iqbal say? And what does Maulana Fadl Rahman Ansari say about that which explains from the Quran the phenomenon of modern Western civilization? Iqbal did it in Urdu, in poetry, not in prose. And he, somewhere around 1917, he published this astonishing verse in Urdu. Khul gaye Ya'juj aur Ma'juj ke lashkar tamam. All the armed forces of Gog and Magog have now been released. All. Chashme Muslim dekh le, tafsir harfi ransirun. The world of Islam must now direct its attention to the Quran, says Iqbal. And when you direct your attention to the Quran, you must direct your attention to Surah Al-Anbiya, says Iqbal. And when you direct your attention to Surah Al-Anbiya, you must direct your attention to this passage, which ends with the word Yansirun. What is the passage of the Quran to which Iqbal is directing attention way back in 1917, more than 100 years ago? Allah speaks in Surah Al-Anbiya about a town. And I have explained this 500,000 times already, so my audience might be fed up of me by now. But I can explain it another 500,000 times, and it would appear it makes no difference. It makes no difference. It's just whistling in the wind. The world of Islamic scholarship will not accept. That is the sad reality. وحرام على قرية أهلكناها أنهم لا يرجعون. Allah speaks of a town, and he said he destroyed the town, and he expelled the people of the town, and he then placed a ban on them that they could never return to reclaim that town as their own. Hatta, until when? Hatta إذا فتحت. Mark the language. فتحت. Mark the language. فتحت. Until حتى إذا فتحت يأجوج ومأجوج وهم من كل حدب ينسلون. And they will never return to reclaim this town until Gog and Magog are released. And when they are released, they spread out in all directions. And in the Hadith al-Qudsi, recorded in Sahih Muslim, Allah speaks and says, I have created creatures of mine, meaning Gog and Magog, who are so powerful that none but I can destroy them. So when Gog and Magog are released into the world, they come with a power which is indestructible. There is no power in the world which can stand up to them, to defeat them. If ever they withdraw from a battle, it is because there is a public relation disaster if they continue. That's not a defeat, that's a withdrawal. So who are Gog and Magog? They are a people who will bring these people back to that town from which they had been expelled, and Allah had placed a ban on them. And which is the town? Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari, rahimahullah, came to the conclusion that the town was Jerusalem. And he was correct. But he did not publish his views. He did not publish his views. And we got to know of his views from someone else who said, Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari, explain the subject to me. And that man wrote a small pamphlet on Israel and Gog and Magog, and I read that pamphlet. It would appear that Iqbal came to the same conclusion, but we don't have the evidence to support the view that the town is Jerusalem. I came to the same conclusion in the 1990s when I was based in New York. But I did it by climbing the mountain myself. I got no help from Iqbal, I got no help from Maulana Ansari. I climbed the mountain by myself. And I came to the conclusion that the town was Jerusalem. And then I said, this is supported by Nabi Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Why? How does Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam support the view that the town mentioned in Surah Al-Anbiya is Jerusalem. I can only hope and pray that Allah might take these words to those in whose hearts there is no arrogance of knowledge, that they might understand and accept it. But for those who are arrogant, intellectually arrogant, they're following Shaitan. They're hopeless. Nabi Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam spoke about Gog and Magog traveling past the Sea of Galilee on their way to Jerusalem. Of course, the word Jerusalem is not in the Hadith. It is Baytul Maqdis. And Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam also said that Allah Most High would destroy Gog and Magog in Jerusalem. So we have support from Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam that the town is Jerusalem. And this was the view of that outstanding scholar of Islam, Maulana Dr. Muhammad Fadlur Rahman Ansari, rahimahullah. Now then, when you and I accept that the town is Jerusalem, now it's possible for us to understand reality, not only in the world, but also in the Holy Land. And it's also now possible for us to look to the way forward. You cannot plan a way forward unless you understand where you are and what is the reality which confronts you. If Gog and Magog are those who brought the Jews back to Jerusalem to reclaim it as their own, 2,000 years after Allah had expelled them and placed a ban on them that they could never return to reclaim Jerusalem as their own, then who are Gog and Magog? The answer is Gog and Magog are those who control power in modern Western civilization. What we have done here tonight is what the world of Islamic scholarship is not prepared to do. And I have been teaching this subject for more than 25 years, and I'm just whistling in the wind, a voice crying in the wilderness. I'm going to use language which may appear to be harsh, but what can I do? When I look at this subject, the necessity of turning to the Quran to find an explanation in the Quran for the phenomenon of modern Western civilization and the silence from the world of Islamic scholarship and the refusal to listen to me, I have no other alternative but to declare that there is an intellectual paralysis which now affects Islamic scholarship, the world of Islamic scholarship. This is very harsh language, but Iqbal used even harsher language than that. Iqbal said there's a need for a reconstruction of religious thought in Islam. That's far more harsh than my language. So now, the first and the second fasad was Banu Israel, but the third fasad is Gog and Magog. And if the third fasad is Gog and Magog, we now understand that Gog and Magog not only control power in the modern West, but also control power in Israel. That those who control power in Israel are not Banu Israel. Banu Israel are a people who are genetically cousins of the Arabs. There is a genetic affinity between Banu Israel and the Arabs. They're like cousins. But those who control power in Israel are not Banu Israel. They are a European people who have no genetic links with Banu Israel. They are part of modern Western civilization. Now then, we can now understand the power which they wield and why that power is resting on the foundations of godlessness. An indestructible power. No combination of forces in the world can resist them. Before we leave Gog and Magog, let us turn to the view that Gog and Magog are creatures living in the interior of the earth. Funny looking creatures, perhaps for amusement's sake, with 24 noses and 3 ears and so on. That's the kind of language you find in the Hadith. Okay, let us examine that Hadith using the Quran as a judge. When we turn to the Quran for absolute truth, Allah has created sentient beings. Only 3. Not animals, not trees and plants. Sentient beings, only 3. The angels, because an angel can say, I am Gabriel. The angel has self-consciousness. I am Gabriel and you are the messenger of Allah. And Allah has created jinn. And the jinn can say, I am better than him. You created me from fire and you created him from clay. So the jinn also has self-consciousness. But in addition to that, the jinn has a self-directed will, meaning the jinn has a free choice. The angels don't have that. An angel must obey whatever command Allah gives, but a jinn can disobey. And Allah has also created human beings who have self-consciousness. They have a self-directed will or free will. And my teacher of blessed memory, Dr. Burhan Ahmad Farooqi, wrote a beautiful PhD thesis. Oh yes, small but beautiful. A Mujaddid's conception of Tawheed. And in that book, he analyzes human consciousness. What are the constituent elements of human consciousness? That's another story, but for those who have an appetite for knowledge, read that book. So now then, these are the 3 that Allah has created. Gog and Magog commit fasad. That's what the Quran says. Where? In Surah Al-Kahf. Inna Ya'juj wa Ma'juj mufsiduna fil ard. In order for Gog and Magog to commit fasad, Gog and Magog have to be sentient beings, but they can't be angels, because angels do not commit evil. Gog and Magog cannot be jinn. Why? Because when Zulkarnain built the barrier of blocks and iron, they could neither penetrate nor could they scale. But a jinn could pass through the wall. So now, all that remains is that Gog and Magog have to be human beings, not some fancy creatures living in the interior of the earth. Allah never sent human beings to live in the interior of the earth. But it is such a sad story that so many Muslims accept the hadith uncritically, and so they are misled into believing that Gog and Magog must be some kind of a strange creatures, not human. That's nonsense. Then Allah's messenger spoke about Gog and Magog in the context of the return of Nabi Isa alayhi salam. That after Nabi Isa alayhi salam returns and he kills Dajjal, then says a hadith of Sahih Muslim, listen carefully, فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ يَأْجُوجَ وَمَأْجُوجَ. Ba'atha means to send. Futihat is to release. The Quran speaks of release. The hadith does not speak of release. It says sending. Allah will send Gog and Magog. So the world of Islamic scholarship, with the exception of Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari, and the possible exception of Dr. Muhammad Iqbal, the world of Islamic scholarship, correct me if I'm wrong, the world of Islamic scholarship is all agreed that Gog and Magog have not as yet been released by Allah. And that Gog and Magog are not actors in the world today. Gog and Magog will only be released by Allah after Nabi Isa alayhi salam returns and after he has killed Dajjal. Only then will Allah release Gog and Magog. And I have tried and I have failed. And for me, it's a hopeless task. I call it intellectual paralysis. And unless and until you can go to the Quran to locate that which explains the phenomenon of modern Western civilization, you can't deal with the Holy Land. You can't look to see the way forward for Palestine. We now leave that part of Surah Al-Kahf and we turn to another part where Allah speaks of Zulkarnain. And I am indebted to Muhammad Asad, rahimahullah. Muhammad Asad, yes, he made a mountain of a mistake in declaring that Jesus, Nabi Isa alayhi salam, is dead. But we don't write him off because of that. No. We point out he made a mistake here, but whatever he did which was valuable, we should benefit from it. So Muhammad Asad argues, he says Allah has never used the word qarn in the Quran to mean horn. Every time that Allah uses the word qarn in the Quran, He uses it to mean a generation, a people, an epoch. This is compelling analysis. And so, when Allah speaks of Zulkarnain, He's not speaking of someone with two horns. No. He's speaking of someone who impacts on history twice. The first time, Zulkarnain was able to use the language of chess, checkmate, Gog and Magog, contain them, and they were harmless. The world was safe. But Zulkarnain began his travels with a journey in the direction of the setting of the sun. And there he came across a body of water. The Quran describes it as Aynun Hamia. And to cut a long story short, it is the Black Sea. And the commentator of the Quran, Ibn Kathir, agrees it's the Black Sea. And then he traveled in the direction of the rising of the sun, so then it'll be the Caspian Sea, because you can't go beyond that. And in between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, he met this huge mountain range. And in between the mountains, Bain Sadafain, shaped like the two sides of a shell, was a passage, or a gorge. And that is where the people spoke to him about Gog and Magog. And he built the barrier. This was the first of the two currents. There are two currents because it is Karnain. Sometimes I feel I can explain this subject another 500,000 times. It will make no difference. Yes. This is the sad reality in the winter of my life, that I've been a voice crying in the wilderness, trying to teach the subject. They will not listen. Intellectual paralysis. The story of Zulkarnain is that there is going to be someone who will impact on history twice. That's why he's called Karnain, Zulkarnain. And the first time happened before the Quran was revealed. But the journey began at the Black Sea. And then after he built the barrier, and Gog and Magog were contained, He then declared, as Alexander could not declare, and Cyrus could not declare, Darius could not declare, because Allah never spoke to them. هَذَا رَحْمَةٌ مِّن رَبِّي. This barrier which I have built is a gift of rahmah, kindness from Allah. فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ رَبِّي. But when that time comes of which my Lord has warned, جَعَلَهُ دَكَّاءَ. Allah is going to bring down the barrier. وَكَانَ وَعْدُ رَبِّي حَقًّا. And then the warning of Allah will come to pass. And that barrier came down in the lifetime of Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. He was asleep at the home of his wife Zainab radiyallahu ta'ala anha. The hadith is in Sahih Bukhari. And he had a vision. And the vision was so terrifying that he woke up with his face flushed red. And he uttered these unforgettable words. وَيْلٌ لِلْعَرَبِ مِنْ شَرٍّ قَدْ اقْتَرَبَ. Woe, woe unto the Arabs because of an evil which is now approaching. And then he raised his hand and he said, like this, today a hole has been made in the barrier built by Zulkarnain. For us, this is enough. This is enough evidence that Allah has started the process of dismantling the barrier. But the world of Islamic scholarship insists obstinately, so the barrier is still standing. Gog and Magog are still there behind the barrier. So we say to them, you don't even need to go to a travel agency and buy a ticket to travel to check to see if the wall is still there. All that you need is a laptop and an internet connection. And there's something called Google Earth. And you can see the whole earth. And if there was a wall still standing, somebody would have discovered it by now. And so they're living in fantasy land. This is Islamic scholarship today. In pathetic misguidance on the subject of Gog and Magog. When they were released in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, eventually we saw the evidence when the world of Christianity was broken into two. And one part, this is not Christianity. The Quran does not refer to it as Christianity. The Quran refers to it as Rome, Surah to Rome. And one part of Rome broke away from Constantinople because they went fishing. They went fishing. And Allah cursed them. He cursed them. He said, Kunu kiradatan khasi'in. Be apes, despise. Immediately after this passage, which is in Surah Al-A'raf, there comes this verse. وَإِذْ تَأَذَّنَ رَبُّكَ وَإِذْ تَأَذَّنَ رَبُّكَ. Your Lord has now made this announcement. لَيَبْعَثَنَّ عَلَيْهِمْ, I am going to send against them, إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ مَنْ يَسُومُهُمْ سُوءَ الْعَذَابِ. I'm going to send against them those who inflict upon them until the end of the world as that which will punish them with terrible punishment. This has to be Dajjal and Gog and Magog. But that's my opinion, and you should not accept my view unless you are convinced that I am correct. But you cannot say I'm wrong unless you can say what is right. Don't say I'm wrong unless you can tell me what is right. And so now, Gog and Magog are released from the world in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. And Gog and Magog are located in modern Western civilization. It's not just power that they have, but Gog and Magog and modern Western civilization. I have a fond term. I use it from the Urdu language to refer to them. I call them Monkey Town. But in Urdu, Bandarabad. Monkey Town. Because of Suratul Araf. Now then, we come now to the interesting part of the subject for our topic, Palestine, the way forward. When will the second current take place? No one in the entire world of Islamic scholarship is asking that question. No one. This is the pathetic intellectual paralysis. And I make no apologies for using this language. And if you want to reject me and reject my scholarship, fine, that's not a problem for me. I'm not dependent on you for anything. When will the second Qarn of Qarnayn take place? That is a very important question. Because when the second Qarn of Qarnayn takes place, then the Jews in Jerusalem, in the Holy Land, it's goodbye to you. Goodbye to you. You've lost the big support you had all the time. And my answer is that if I am to identify when the second Qarn of Qarnayn is taking place, I must look in the direction of the Black Sea. And I must look to see when power returns to the region of the Black Sea, resting on the foundations of faith in Allah. And that power is used to resist Gog and Magog, to resist the oppression. Are you with me? I've not lost you, have I? Good. I came to the conclusion it could not be the Soviet Union, although the Soviet Union controlled power in the Black Sea, because power was resting on a foundation that was godless and atheist. So we dismissed the Soviet Union. Who else wielded power in the Black Sea the Ottoman Empire. I came to the conclusion that the Ottoman Empire could not be the second Qarn of Qarnayn, because the Ottoman Empire used power to oppress. So I dismissed the Ottoman Empire. It was only when the Soviet Union collapsed, and as soon as the Soviet Union collapsed, Russia rapidly returned to her Christian heart. Number one. Number two, Russia, under the rule of the Soviet Union, was miraculously transformed within a matter of just a few decades, 60, 70 years, from a feudal society and an agrarian economy to a modern, scientifically and technologically advanced state. That's what the Soviet Union did. I was a young man, still in my short pants, when the Soviet Union sent something called Sputnik into orbit around the Earth. The young people here would not know the excitement there was in the world when Sputnik went around the Earth. This was Soviet scientific and technological advancement on show. So when Russia returned to her Christian heart, and then Russia, which was already a scientifically and technologically advanced state, suddenly, Russia overtook the West in missile technology. What is missile technology? Objects flying through space at a speed faster than anything that the Western world ever had. Today it's called hypersonic speed. And I recognize that this was connected with the Quran, but that's another subject. And then when I saw Russia recover Crimea in 2014, and at the same time that Russia recovered Crimea, the war with Ukraine was beginning. Because the color revolution took place in Ukraine in 2014, and that ushered eventually the war. So in 2014, when Russia recovered Crimea, I said it's time for Imran to celebrate. Because I could recognize that the world is now witnessing the commencement of the second Qarn of Qarnayn. But I remain a solitary voice with no support from anyone in the world of Islamic scholarship. And it doesn't bother me at all that I have been a solitary voice, because I am convinced that Allah, in His kindness, has blessed me to understand and explain the Quran correctly. So I can close my eyes without being worried. Now then, the hadith is that when Gog and Magog are released, the first of them will pass by the Sea of Galilee and start to drink the water. Not this. Drink means to consume. And by the time the last of them pass, the last, why last? They will say, there used to be water here. So I've made a link between the two. The second current of Karnain and the last of them. That Russia is now destined to contain and to checkmate Gog and Magog, meaning NATO, in the north. And when Russia checkmates them, and the writing is already on the wall, it's already on the wall. When Russia checkmates them in the north, no more Gog and Magog will be going to Jerusalem. So Netanyahu, you're now left with only those which are already released. No more to come. So now what's the road forward? Allah's messenger said that when Nabi Isa alayhi salam comes, then Gog and Magog will pursue him, and he will climb the mountain in Jerusalem, and they will surround the mountain. And then Nabi Isa alayhi salam will pray to Allah to destroy them. And Allah will then wage biological warfare. And they will all be attacked with something at the top of the spine. Biological warfare. And they will fall down paralyzed. Dr. Mohsen Ibrahim is the expert here in this field of medical ethics. It appears to me that genetically modified food is meant to deprive the immune system of the nourishment it requires. And as you eat genetically modified food, your immune system will continuously grow weaker and weaker until eventually, with this virus, you'll collapse. And Gog and Magog will then die. Next morning, their bodies are decomposing. And that's goodbye now for Israel. If Gog and Magog are those who brought the Jews back to Jerusalem, it does follow now that history cannot end without an intervention by NATO in Israel. The NATO has to intervene in the Holy Land. That the United States and Britain and France and Germany and so on will send their troops to the Holy Land. What can happen to precipitate such a military intervention? I just heard President Trump saying, we have now taken over Gaza. Gaza belongs to us. I said, well, my gosh, there you are. The Americans are now moving into Gaza because it belongs to them. And you're going to have American troops in Gaza. And then Trump will ask the British and the French and German to also join the contentment in Gaza. whatever is the scenario that's going to take place, in order for Gog and Magog to be destroyed, when Nabi Isa alayhi salam returns, what remains of Gog and Magog in the world will now have to come to the Holy Land to be destroyed. And therefore, we conclude, in our view, Palestine, the way forward, with this momentous view that what lies ahead is a NATO military intervention in the Holy Land, which will precipitate and lead to the destruction of Gog and Magog by Allah Ta'ala himself through a biological warfare. Now then, I want to turn, this lecture can go on for hours. But I want to touch on one more subject, Gaza, the way forward. And that is our Prophet ﷺ said, he warned that in the end time there'll be great liars, so beware. In the end time there'll be great liars, so beware. And the motto of the Israeli Mossad is by way of deception. And what happened in October 2023 was that the 9/11 was repeated. I was in New York on 9/11, 2001. I was in New York. I went that morning to Kennedy Airport at 7 o'clock. And from Kennedy Airport, I went to the airport in New Jersey. And the airport was closed. Flights were cancelled. We didn't know why. And then while I was there in the airport, they said the airport is closed, everybody must vacate the airport. When I went home, then I saw on television what happened, that the World Trade Center had collapsed and so on, a terrorist attack. And I realized that this was a repeat of what happened in the summer of 1914, when an act of terrorism precipitated the First World War. The assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo in the summer of 1914 precipitated the First World War. And I said history was repeating itself. That this is an act of terrorism which is meant to prepare the way for a big, big, big event. 4 days after 9/11, I delivered my last lecture in New York, in New Jersey, at an Islamic center. And there was electricity in the air because there was so much excitement. And everybody was saying they're blaming us. We Muslims are being blamed. We're being framed. So I gave my lecture to a packed gathering. And at the end of my lecture, I said, I want you to raise your hands, everybody, and make a dua with me. And this is the dua I want you to make. Let us pray to Allah to curse with an everlasting curse and to punish with eternal punishment whoever was responsible for planning and executing 9/11. And two people sitting next to it, how can we do that? We were responsible. I ignored them. I said, are you ready? And I raised my hands. And the whole gathering raised their hands. And then these two fellows eventually raised their hands as well. After we made the dua, I said, now we invite the Jews to make this dua. They've never done it. They've never done it. The same 9/11 was repeated in October 23. What the Israeli Mossad did with the CIA was to funnel weapons which were being sent, state-of-the-art weapons and drones, which were being sent in huge quantities to Ukraine. And they funneled it to Gaza. And they used Saudi Arabia as the medium through which they could reach Gaza. And because Hamas, I'm sorry to say this, they had only peanuts in their head. And Hamas were very much happy. And they were convinced that the weapons were coming from Santa Claus. Yeah. And we must thank Santa Claus, we're getting the weapons. And they never smelled the rat. They never smelled the rat. That Israel was setting them up. And Israel knew when they were planning the attack. Egypt sent a message to Israel, warning Israel, the attack is coming. Israeli government did nothing to prevent the attack from taking place. Why? Because they wanted it to take place and they had planned it. And so when the attack took place and Hamas was able to do what they did, Israel now got the opportunity to respond in the way that Israel responded. And when Israel responded, her objective was, number one, to destroy Hamas once and for all. But she had a bigger objective than that. She also wanted to get rid of the Palestinians from Gaza. So Israel started to destroy every single building in Gaza and driving the Palestinians down to the south. So once the buildings are destroyed, there is nothing to return to. This is a war crime. Israel was hoping that the Palestinians cornered in the bottom of Gaza would be taken by Egypt or by Jordan. They would not remain there. And when that did not happen, and then Biden lost the election and Trump took over, then Trump said, we've taken over Gaza and we're going to restore Gaza to be the new Riviera. Meaning, we want the Palestinians to be taken over by Jordan, by Saudi Arabia. And when he mentioned Saudi Arabia, that caused problems for them. In other words, our solution to the Palestinian problem is to export the Palestinians and solve the problem. And that has not happened, and that will not happen. But Israel wanted to do more than that. Israel also wanted to provoke Hezbollah to join the war. And Hezbollah resisted. And eventually, when Hezbollah resisted, then Israel attacked Hezbollah and killed Hassan Nasrallah and killed every leader of Hezbollah. And Hezbollah has been now mortally wounded. Israel wanted more than that. Israel wanted to provoke Iran to join the war so that Israel could attack Iran and the United States will join in that war against Iran. But that did not happen. What I did not know, I did not anticipate it, but that Israel also had planned for regime change in Syria. Because of Hamas having only peanuts in their head and attacking Israel when they did on October the 7th, 23, they handed Israel the opportunity to achieve all these objectives. So now our conclusion is that the way forward for the Palestinians is you must not make this mistake. Allah says in the Quran, إِذَا جَاءَكُمْ فَاسِقٌ بِنَبَإٍ فَتَبَيَّنُوا أَن تُصِيبُوا قَوْمًا بِجَهَالَةٍ فَتُصْبِحُوا عَلَى مَا فَعَلْتُمْ نَادِمِينَ. When news come to you from a sinful source, be careful, check it out, because if you don't, you can make a mistake and be trapped and eventually regret your mistake. So I'm sure that there are more traps awaiting for Palestine in the way ahead. And it is with insight, it is with basar, and being able to anticipate what the enemy is doing, that we can look forward to a better response than the one so far from Hamas. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
The Q&A section of the discourse will now commence. Please bring all your written questions to the panel.
When the Zionists shoot innocent babies in the head, how do we explain? What kind of people are these? What kind of psychology do they have to do such a thing? The answer is located in the belief, which is a false belief, that Allah has created them as the chosen people of the Lord God, that they are born superior, that they have a birthright of superiority, and that the rest of mankind are less than human. We are the models of a human being. The Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir once addressed a gathering at the funeral of an Israeli who had been killed by the Arabs. And the funeral was taking place on a hilltop. And these were his words. I say to you, the Palestinians, from this hilltop, that in our eyes you are no more than grasshoppers. In our eyes, you are no more than grasshoppers. So they don't consider you to be human beings like themselves. So they have no pity, no human pity. They can shoot babies in their head. Is the intellectual paralysis due to dogmatic blinkers of our ulama that suppress independent thought? You were so gracious in pardoning Muhammad Asad's mistake in saying that Jesus died. Yet you looked at the good that he did. No one is perfect. So why do our South African ulama slaughter each other, and especially you? It pains me because in every day I witness you pray, Allahumma barik, arina al-haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittiba'ah, wa arina al-batila batilan warzuqna ijtinabah, which means, yes, okay, Dr. Nawaz Khaki, all right. What is the cause of the intellectual paralysis? That is a question Dr. Mohsin Ibrahim will have to answer. He is academically the highest of all of us. No student of Maulana Fazlur Rahman Ansari has risen higher academically than our brother Mohsin. Why do you think the mainstream Islamic scholars are so reluctant to accept your views on Jerusalem? It's not only my views, it's also the views of Maulana Fazlur Rahman Ansari. Why are they so reluctant to accept your views on Gog and Magog? What do you think are the implications for them if they did not accept your views? Answer. Mohsin will have to explain why they are not accepting. But the implications of not accepting is that you are at sea. You are incapable of understanding the reality of the world today, and hence incapable of responding appropriately. So you are at sea. How much of a role has this scholarly paralysis played, if at all, in the indecisiveness and inability of Arab governments to act regarding the Palestinian cause? No. The people, the Arab people, the Muslim people around the world are all ready, all of them are ready to fight, to liberate Jerusalem. Yes, just give the word. And many Muslims will be ready to go and fight. But the governments control them, and the armed forces control them, and they are imprisoned. This is the case particularly so of Pakistan. So if you want a Muslim army to march to Jerusalem, as our Prophet has prophesied, from Khorasan, you have to first liberate Pakistan. Afghanistan is already free. Iran is already free, but Pakistan is not. Why will the victory of Russia be a victory for the Islamic world? In Surah to Rum, Allah says, وَيَوْمَئِذٍ يَفْرَحُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, that on that day when Rome is victorious, you Muslims will celebrate. So their victory is ours based on the Quran. Will Nabi Isa alayhi salam return to Bani Israel or to the Muslims? Oh, I'm disappointed with this question. Allah has spoken in the Quran, and obviously you have not read the Quran, you have not studied the Quran. If Allah says in the Quran, I have sent you to Banu Israel, this is what He says in Surah As-Saf. Ya Bani Israel, Inni Rasulullahi ilaykum. I am the messenger of Allah sent to you, Banu Israel. Can I change that? Huh? No? Can you change that? No? So the question disappoints me. If Allah has sent him to Banu Israel, when he comes back, he's coming back to Banu Israel. So the hadith about ummati is nonsense. Who will stop the last of Gog and Magog? But I answer that. The reason why they are the last of Gog and Magog to pass by the Sea of Galilee is because the second current of Qarnayn will block them. But no one in the whole world of Islamic scholarship, no one is asking about the second current of Qarnayn. Mine is a voice crying in the wilderness for 25 years now. If the second current of Qarnayn is now taking place, when Russia took control of Crimea, the implication is that what is going to happen in Ukraine will eventually lead to checkmate for Gog and Magog. So there'll be no more help coming from the north. Only those who now remain in Jerusalem will be destroyed. When will Pax Judaica emerge? Good question. In order for Pax Britannica to emerge, Britain had to wage huge numbers of wars. In order for Pax Americana to replace Pax Britannica, we needed 2 world wars. So through analogical reasoning, we come to the conclusion that it is only after the Great War, the Malhama, or Armageddon, that the passage from Pax Americana to Pax Judaica can be effected. Where is the Mahdi in Akhir Zaman? When the time comes for Nabi Isa alayhi salam to return to this world. And Allah has taught him the Quran, in addition to the Gospel and the Torah. Nabi Isa alayhi salam will be returning to his ummah. But because he taught the Quran, he also has a responsibility as a guide for this ummah. Otherwise, why did Allah teach him the Quran? In order for him to fulfill his responsibility to the ummah of Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, before he returns, Allah has to send the Imam. No one can possibly achieve the dismantling of all these 50-something nation states into which the world of Islam is now divided. No one can possibly dismantle that except Imam al-Mahdi. And when he returns, it will have to be after the Great War. After the Great War. And when he emerges, he has to restore integrity, political integrity, to the world of Islam. And so the Khilafah state would be restored in Mecca. When the Khilafah state is restored in Mecca, this will represent the most formidable threat to Israel. There will be nothing in the world to compare with that threat to Israel. So Israel will now be hell-bent on tracking the Mahdi and cornering him and killing him. That is the most important thing for Israel and for Dajjal. And they eventually will succeed in locating the Mahdi when he is in a masjid in Damascus. And Israel will launch a lightning invasion of Syria. And the Israeli army, headed by Dajjal, would surround the masjid. The Imam is inside, and Dajjal is outside. And then Allah sends Nabi Isa alayhi salam. And the rest, I don't need to tell you, you know the rest. What are the two times that Banu Israel committed fasad? The first one was when they changed the Torah and they corrupted the Torah and they put many lies into the Torah. And then Allah sent the Babylonian army. And the Babylonian army punished them and destroyed the masjid and took them into Babylon in slavery. The second time was when Allah tested them and He sent the Messiah. But they said he's a bastard. And then they boasted of how they crucified him. And then Allah sent the Roman army, destroyed the masjid, and expelled them. These are the two fasad. What is your opinion of the new Syrian leader? Okay, that's the last question. The leaders who have taken over Syria from Assad got the weapons that they needed, got the money that they needed, got the information, the intelligence that they needed from the Israeli Mossad and from the CIA. And when they attacked, Russia was quickly able to understand that NATO had set a trap, that NATO wanted Russia and Iran to intervene to save Assad. And if Russia and Iran had intervened militarily to save Assad, then NATO would have intervened and Trump would have been on board, even though he's not as yet president. He was president in waiting. And if NATO had intervened in that war, then Ukraine would have been saved from defeat. That was the plan. And when Russia realized that was the plan, Russia advised Iran to stay out. And when they informed Assad they're not going to intervene, Assad said there's no sense fighting. It's a waste of time for people to be killed. So Assad decided to leave, and the Syrian armed forces were advised, stop fighting, so no more lives to be lost. So what Russia and Iran did was to sacrifice Syria so that you can move to victory in Ukraine. It was more important to get victory in Ukraine than to save Assad. When the Assad government fell, then Netanyahu boasted, we have achieved regime change in Syria. And Biden boasted, we have achieved regime change in Syria. So the Syrian regime does not have any credentials. I call them Israel's puppy dogs. And they didn't like that. They became embarrassed because the evidence is plain as daylight, because Netanyahu said, we did it. Biden said, we did it. So these were puppy dogs. That was one of the reasons why they are now backtracking. And they're now saying, we want Russia to remain in Syria. So that's my opinion of the new Syrian regime. This is enough. We have already exhausted all the questions. But before we end, we cannot allow Professor Mohsin Ibrahim to be quiet. We'd like to get a comment from him. The question is, the Quran says that it explains all things. Therefore, the Quran must explain the phenomenon of modern Western civilization. How do we explain that the modern world of Islamic scholarship is so embarrassingly silent on this subject and continuously reject all that I have done the 25 years, rejecting me and rejecting the answer I've given? How do we explain that? Mohsin, you want to make a comment? No. All right. Well, we have Maulana Abdul Rashid with us, and I want you to get a taste of our dear brother Abdul Rashid, that he should address you briefly, not necessarily on the subject about our lecture today, but so you should get to know him, inshallah. You have a mic for him?
It's a great pleasure for me to be here with Sheikh Imran Hussein after 55 years. We both, my nephew Mohsin, he's my nephew. We studied at the second institute, at the Adina Institute of Islamic Studies, under the guidance of Maulana Muhammad Fazlur Rahman Ansari, to whom I owe a lot of respect and gratitude. So whatsoever I am today is due to his instruction and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's good blessings. I'm in Mozambique since 1978. I returned from Pakistan in 1978. And I founded a Muslim Islamic community of Mozambique, the Comunidad Islamic Mozambique. We are, the education in Mozambique, Islamic education in Mozambique is very weak, very poor. There is no proper literature, Islamic literature in Mozambique, in Portuguese, and the knowledge of Islam is very weak among the Muslims. Northern part of Mozambique, you can say 95%, 100%, 98% of the population are Muslims. But unfortunately, they have no knowledge besides the rituals. Nothing else besides the rituals. They know how to pray, but they don't know properly. So that's why lack of education. And we Muslims in Mozambique are not contributing properly to transmit the knowledge of Islam and secular education for those Muslims who are out of town. We are building more big masjids, institutions in the town. In the area of, in the ratios of 3 kilometers, you might find 4 or 5 big masjids. But proper education should be transmitted to those who don't have the nasib, or don't have the fortune to have a proper education, Islamic and secular education as well. And that's why the Muslims are not being upgraded politically, socially, and in other areas. So, due to the knowledge I got from Adina Institute of Islamic Studies, as Maulana Ansari taught psychology and all these things, I founded this community, and we are building primary school along with Islamic education in rural areas, outside of town, where there is no electricity, no light, no pipe water. We are building their schools, and primary school, secondary school as well, even technical school. And we are trying to do something, but it's not enough, because Mozambique is a vast country, it's very big. And on northern part, we have taken over 200 madrasas in suburb areas. My son, he's responsible of the northern part of Mozambique. He looks after those. You have to go to the bushes where there is no light, no energy, but there is madrasa with plastic roof, with glass roof, but they are teaching Quran. And the children are learning. And we are collecting those children who are good in reading Quran properly, we bring to the town, and we have got a hostel in northern part, in the center of Mozambique. So we keep them there for Hafiz al-Quran and for the secular education until 12th class. Then those good students we sent to Darul Victoria. We have got some agreement with Mufti Muhammad Akbar Azadi. They stay 7 years there. And when they become army at Darul Darsenizari, they come back to Mozambique. We employ them to do some Islamic work. They are being paid. And at night, they go to university for higher education. Why? Only Islamic knowledge without secular education, your mind becomes very narrow-minded. So with that knowledge, there's economics, it's political science, whatsoever he wants to do. So he can see the world in another way. So my English is not so fluent, but I'm trying to explain. So we are doing that, all the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the Fadl Karam Maulana Muhammad Fadl Rahman Ansari, we all do him a lot. And once again, I'm very happy to meet my elder brother Imran. Well, he's a sheikh, but when I knew him, he was Imran Nazar Hussain. So I still call him like that, as he's my elder brother. He was our role model. Why? He's a senior to me, to Mohsin as well. When I was there, he was already graduated. So we used to see him as an example for us. May Allah give him long life to transmit this knowledge, higher knowledge, you can say, higher intellectual knowledge to us all. I've learned a lot of today. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Maulana Fadl Rahman Ansari rahimahullah wanted us to earn our livelihood independently. So our hand would be like this, not like this. So Mohsin became a university professor. Abdul Rashid became an engineer, and I became a writer. And that's how we earn our livelihood. He's the chief engineer with the Mozambique government, yeah. All right, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.